why do you think the need of SEL is increasing? So you talked earlier about COVID-19 and you talked about technology. Is there another reason?
I think we live in a world where people have, in some cases, lost the ability to speak civilly to one another. But boredom is the birth of creativity. And so we live in a culture right now where kids and anybody's like afraid to be bored for more than 5 minutes. It's like, oh, no, I'll go on my phone, I'll watch a show. And this constant bombardment of technology and stimulation, if you will.
It makes them feel better that they know that the parents are curious about what they do and they want to learn about it. So you learn that, and at the same time, you can know exactly what they do and follow, since it's not something risky. Hello, everyone. My name is Tomer Kamil. I'm a sport therapist, and you are watching SEL podcast, Jumping Forward. Today, we have a special guest. Jane is here with us. Jane is the author of Social Emotional Learning in the Classroom, and she has been guiding teachers for almost 7 years. Hey, Jane, how are you?
I'm very good, and I'm very honored to be part of this. But I will tell you, I'd like to think it was only 7 years, but I've actually been in the education business about 40 years. So,
Yeah, that's right. But
yeah, I have, this is one of the books, and then there's another book I co-authored, which is Social Emotional in the Home as well. And my official title currently is Director of Special Education and Social Emotional Learning for a company called Rebus Associates and Publications. But my background is I started my career as a public school teacher in Massachusetts in the States. And I worked with children and adolescents with special needs. Then I left education for a while I raised my 3 kids. And then I was in higher education for over 20 years, training teachers. And then I left my college where I was teaching and have gone into consulting. And so the consulting piece, you're right, that's the shorter end of that piece. And now my job is I go out and do professional development for teachers, for parents on a variety of topics. But this is one of the questions was like, how did I get into the social emotional? So I would say the trend of the topic of social emotional learning is not new in the United States, but it's probably had different names over time. And really it's a matter of thinking about taking care of the child or adolescent emotionally. And that if you do that, it also can help improve their academic results. We used to have this idea previously that, you'd get a book out on a Friday afternoon and say, okay, kids, we're going to talk about social emotional now. Well, that doesn't work. It really is not effective. It's a start. But what we've done more lately is embed it in all parts of the day. So one of the questions I know you had was with regard to how do you, say, in a calculus class, deal with social emotional, right? So we'll get to that.
before we start, and I want to ask you, what is social emotional learning? Because we have parents that are watching us from all over the world, and we have teachers that are watching us. So first of all, I would like to hear, what is social emotional learning for you?
Right. Well, it is basically what we look at, and I'm going to use the cover of my book just to say we have 5 areas that we look at. We look at self-awareness is one aspect of social emotional, self-management, social awareness, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills. So those are the 5 major topics of social emotional learning. Now, in the last few years, when the pandemic hit, I would say across the world, we really that shut down so many things. And we noticed, and we're noticing it still, our students took a huge hit on their ability to connect socially with their peers. They were learning everything on a screen. They lost the ability in many cases of looking people in the eye, carrying on a conversation. Everybody was just texting their brains out, and we're still dealing with a lot of the repercussions of that. That's really so social emotional learning. The research will show that when we work with students and try to help them learn to connect to their peers and get along better, that and we take some time to really figure out where they're at emotionally, it will actually help them improve academically. So it's not like this little fuzzy thing on the side that everybody's, we're just paying attention to that piece. The research says when a kid will come into a classroom and feel safe, feel accepted, their academic ability, their ability to focus actually improves.
Yeah, of course, because this is the basis. Because if the kid comes to school and he feels insecure, or he has a lack of communication skills, or a lack of social skills, so he's not free to study. And this is the basis. Why do you think why did you choose to become an SEL coach?
Well, I think it was one of those things. I was always interested in the field of special education. So working with kids that had learning disabilities or learning challenges. And then there was this demand in the schools for, this new trend, a relatively new trend that they wanted people with training to come in and help them do social emotional learning within the classroom. So I got some training to help me do that. And I worked with the people at my company who were even stronger in this area than I am. And we put together this book, and people are craving this kind of content. The other thing I think that made this such a need is not only the pandemic issues, but the rise of the impact of social media. Kids before everybody had um, technology and social media and Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook and whatever, kids would meet up. They would go outside and say, I'll meet you downtown. We'll ride our bikes around. We'll go to each other's house and hang out, and they talk. So I was doing a workshop just last night, and I was talking to a parent who I said one way I try to encourage parents to connect to their kids, especially when they're like middle school, high school age, is to be the volunteer that drives them, because a lot of times they'll say things, you don't say anything, you listen. But she said the problem is everybody gets in the car now and they're on their phone.
Yeah.
And that, so you see what I mean? They have, if you say to a kid, I mean, this is happening here. I don't know what's going on in terms of kids in school there, but if you say to a kid here, listen, I want you to get on the phone and call and order a pizza, or I want you to get on the phone and call your grandmother or whatever. And they'll say, oh, I'll text her, or I'll text the order. And if you say, no, no, I want you to actually pick up the phone and have a conversation, they're intimidated by that. It's like they, somewhere along the line of the last few years, they've lost that ability. And so not only is this skill needed in the academic world they live in, but future employers are telling us that the kids that have good social skills do better in the job market. So it's not in isolation, which, more companies are encouraging team collaboration. And if you have people that don't know how to connect to someone they work with or someone they sit next to in school, this can create a problem. It can
Yeah.
create a problem of depression, anxiety, isolation, and I'm concerned about this. So I think we need to help kids learn these skills.
So my next question was to ask you, but why do you think the need of SEL is increasing? So you talked earlier about COVID-19, and you talked about technology. Is there another reason that you think that?
Well, I think we live in a world where people have, in some cases, lost the ability to speak civilly to one another. And I know in our country, this is definitely true. Definitely true. I think also, when I was a kid, and I always like to say like 100 years ago, um, if you said to your parents, I'm bored, they would say, I'll fix that. And you had household chores to do. but boredom is the birth of creativity. And so we live in a culture right now where kids and anybody's like afraid to be bored for more than 5 minutes. It's like, oh, no, 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 I'll go on my phone, I'll watch a show. And this constant bombardment of technology and stimulation, if you will. But in truth, if you go back to a lot of the creativity of our cultures, it's someone having space mentally and physically, and they might have been bored, that comes up with new ideas, a new game, a new way to do something, a new invention. And a lot of that is because they might have been bored. So boredom is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Boredom can teach you to be creative.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Um, we talked earlier, and you said that you think that it's possible to implement SEL in every class, even in math class. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yes, well, that's when I do training for schools, one of the things that comes up with some teachers, and because, I'm sure there's required exams that your kids have to do, and we have that.
Yeah.
I'm living in Massachusetts in the States, and we have these thing called MCAS and their assessment tests. So teachers are feeling a little beleaguered because they're saying, well, wait, we don't have time because we have to cover blah, 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 blah. However, we can show ways where teachers can implement social skills into even a math class. Sometimes it's something as simple as saying, I'm going to give you a problem and I want you to problem solve with your partner. That alone builds collaboration. And then you might have to change up the groups a bit. So it's not all, when I was talking to another group of teachers and we were talking about the concept of group projects. And this one teacher said, well, I hated those when I was a kid because I always did all the work and then there were the slackers that didn't do anything, right?
Or
So I
maybe
said,
no
oh,
one wants to be with me, or maybe no one wants to be my partner.
or yeah, that's it. That could be another thing. So you have to, the teacher has a semblance of the dynamics of the classroom and can say, look, what we're going to do here is we're going to change up the groups. So once in a while, you're going to work with someone sitting next to you, and another time we're going to work with someone over here so that they get to know each other. And there's a level of trust built within the community of that classroom. And so I did send you a little video that you can show at some point. And it's an elementary classroom, and it's a really good example how this one math teacher did an approach that we would call fishbowl. So you can imagine this: there would be a cluster of students working, maybe out of a class of 20, let's say, you have 5 or 6 kids, and they're working at a table together on different aspects. The rest of the group has a notebook and walks around and listens to the conversation that they're having as they problem solve. That's another form of implementing SEL into a math classroom. And you can do this in
Yeah.
science, you can do this in social studies, you can do this in language arts. There really are a lot of creative ways to do this.
I believe that it's easier to teach when the student enjoy the process, when they have fun. So have you noticed that students enjoy something special the most? When maybe you have a special drill or
Well, I think,
special program?
I think a lot of it has to do with the teacher, like, for example, I was not a math student, all right? Algebra 2 was my nemesis. However, I had another math teacher who really, I know, knew I was trying hard and worked with me. So when I was in that class, I felt like I wanted to give good effort to him because he made me not feel stupid. Like I could excel in other areas, but math was never going to be my area. But in his class, he made it safe for me to say, listen, Mr. McGowan, I need help with XYZ. And he spent the time, you know, another teacher who could be more judgmental and make you feel dumb, you're not going to speak up in that classroom. So a lot of times the teacher sets the tone for the classroom. The teacher can also set the tone for how students speak to one another. What we try to encourage maybe at the beginning of the school year is to say, this is our classroom. And within this classroom, we're going to set up some guidelines of expected behavior. and everybody has to agree to it. Like it's a group effort. So if a kid has an infraction, the teacher goes, let's go back to those rules we set up in September. Are you doing that right now? No. Well, what are you going to do about that? And I use the term social autopsy. Everybody knows what an autopsy is. When a kid screws up or something happens, you can do a social autopsy and say, let's talk about what just happened. What do you think went wrong? What do you think? How do you think that kid feels when you said that? What could you do differently? So those are some strategies too that you can do in a classroom.
So I agree, but I think the problem is that, as you said earlier, that the teacher has material to teach, and sometimes she's not aware of it, and sometimes she doesn't want to deal with it, the teacher. So the fact that you guide now teachers and you teach them how to do it and teach them that it's possible to implement ESL in each class, in each period, so it's extremely important because you say actually there is SEL everywhere in class, outside, when you are with your friend, when you're with your family, it's everywhere, and you can teach it everywhere. So we just need to be aware of it. And I think that when we when when we can focus on it, so it's easier than later. Later, it's easier to teach the material that we want.
Well, I do
And
think, I mean, that is a real challenge for teachers because, you got a pressure from maybe your administrator who's saying, hey, I want to see progress where you are in the book. But like I said, research will back this up that when you take the time to implement some of these other things, I will say, sometimes you will do, there's a difference between covering a topic and deep learning. All right. So I can cover a topic and might go fast as anything and check it off. I covered that. Boom. But what is happening in terms of deeper learning? Deeper learning is when it's retained more. So I might not go through it as quickly, but the students are more likely to retain the information because of this deeper learning. And how does that happen? Maybe you get into a conversation. So let's say you're taking a book from literature, Shakespeare, whatever, and you're saying, not everybody's got the ability to maybe master Shakespearean language, but maybe you focus on one part of it and say, well, what do you think Shakespeare was saying this? And getting kids to really think about it. The other thing that's interesting, I heard this the other day from someone that, and this is going to add a whole other dimension to the challenges of teaching, is AI, artificial intelligence. So how is that going to play a part? Well, I thought this was an interesting use because, everybody's paranoid that people are going to use it just for plagiarism, but that's really, I don't think that's going to be that big a problem. If a kid is not a great writer and all of a sudden they start turning in masterpieces, you're going to be like, yeah, I don't think so. Right. But what the AI could do is, let's say my class is studying Shakespeare and we're doing Hamlet. And I might say to the AI, could you write this play in a more simplified language so the students that don't read as well still understand the storyline, and AI can turn that out to you. So there's your, we talk a lot about, and everybody's talking about now, about differentiated instruction. So one teacher making sure they've covered the content and they can use this AI to maybe help, implement that into
yeah,
to help. And, again, doing things to make a kid feel included, not excluded, that is sort of just setting a tone of social emotional practice within your classroom experience for the teacher and for the student. I also talk to administrators about this because, administrators can be very supportive of their teachers around these issues. And then in turn, the teachers feel more protected and supported, and they're more likely to do a better job within their classroom. I mean, it's really, it's like if everybody gets some support here, if the administrator learns that teachers are real people with real needs and they do some things to maybe make their day a little brighter, and then they feel good, and then the teachers feeling good about the administrators giving them good feedback, And then they, in turn, carry that hopefully positive feeling to within their classroom. And that's why I talk to parents about this too. I mean, parents need support on this issue too. They've got, when I always say this group I was speaking to last night, they're a lot of them are just about their kids are just hitting puberty. And I'm like, God bless you. Good luck. That's a rough age. And it's supposed to be the time when kids are pulling away and their social skills with their peers might be okay, but they're sometimes really downright mean to their parents. And I'm trying to help the parents understand that don't take it seriously, but not personally. So this is all tied into that SEL thing.
So usually you teach the entire class, or you pick students that face challenges and need more help?
I would say both because, for example, in my role, I'm doing a lot of professional development. So a school system hires me to come in and do workshops for their teachers. But now I'm the teacher. And in this classroom, let's say I have a child that may be on the autism spectrum. So this is a kid that has more challenges socially.
Yeah.
They don't naturally give you eye contact. They may not have a good sense of personal space. They may get on a topic and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And other kids are like, give me a break. I don't want, you can't, he can't get off that topic.
Yes.
So those kids may need more explicit instruction. This was a true story. It happened in a middle school. So there was a young boy, nice kid, and he had a crush on one of his classmates, but he was following around like a puppy, right? And he wasn't understanding. She was trying to be polite, but it was making her uncomfortable. And her father was a
Yeah.
lawyer and called the school and said, yeah, this has got to stop. So the people that worked with him kind of, he had some learning issues. They said, okay, we need to talk about what's appropriate and what is not appropriate. You can still talk to her, but you have to give her space. You can't be following her around. So there's a case where someone really needs more what I call explicit social instruction because they didn't know they were doing something.
So how do you pick the students that need more help, and how do you set the goals?
Well, we have a thing in our country. If the student is on a special ed plan, it's called an, IEP thing, and it's supposed to be an individualized educational program. So if a kid is on that, a student, um, they may have written into that IEP some social goals that will help them. In other cases, a kid may be academically fine, but the teacher notices this type of behavior that's off-putting, and they might work with the school adjustment counselor, guidance people, or whatever to help that kid have a better understanding of appropriate social behavior. Because, this is one of those things, it can carry on to your adulthood. If you think about people that you've acquainted with in your life, there's people that you're drawn to and you want to hang out with because they're team players, they get your jokes, they're easy to be with. And there's other people that are very awkward and they may not mean to be awkward. They maybe have trouble in that social realm. But the problem is it can get exacerbated and they sometimes are shunned, which is painful. And I would hear stories about kids that were just desperate for one friend. And then they make
Yeah.
that one friend and they call them every day. They want to be with them every day. And then that friendship fails. So they need help with sort of understanding, there's a nuance to making friends and keeping friends. And I made the mistake of thinking everybody understood that. It's not true. We have kids, little kids sometimes, and you say to them, well, just go out and play. And they get on the playground and they look at other kids because they don't understand how to break into that just play thing.
So how to
That's,
approach a kid that you
yeah.
don't know, and how to share, and how to listen, and yeah.
So we have there's a guy, Dr. Daniel Goleman, who wrote a book, one of what, the big book I call it, on emotional intelligence. I think he's a Harvard guy. And he, one of the things they came up with that a predictor of a happier life has more to do with social acumen and not as much an academic acumen. So as much as we want all kids to be prepared and learn and excel academically, if they're struggling, a lot of times when they come home sad or upset, it has nothing to do with their academic. It's more to do with some social thing that happened.
And how do you do it exactly? You reflect it when it happens and you stop and analyze it.
I think in some cases, you might need to like this was an example. So a few years ago, I had a grad student that was doing her student teaching at a middle school, and there were a cluster of girls that I would say all were a little bit. They might have been on the autism spectrum, but they definitely had some neuro challenges. So she started working with them at lunchtime, and it was called a lunch bunch. They would come in, have lunch with her, and she got them to read this book called The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, which was a very popular, very popular book for adolescents and high school kids. And then she picked some other more typical students in the school that were willing to come in to the same group, and they would meet once a week and talk about the book. So the typical peers were sort of modeling give and take conversation and this whole thing. But the other benefit, so when let's say I'm not in the cool, I call it the cool girl group, and I'm out in the hallway. Now, one of the girls that was in the book group with me, that's one of the cool girls, sees me and says, "Hi, Jane," and it elevates my status.
yeah.
And I'm feeling pretty darn good about that. So there's a case where a teacher set it up and it blossomed. So I know I have another friend who teaches in Ohio, and she's a high school teacher. And she started this thing. She actually came up. She might be, if you want to do another podcast, she'd be a very good guest because she did this program where she started with high school kids that were definitely having some problems with the social thing. And she found kids that were typical socially who were willing to be peer mentors.
Mhm.
And it started very slow, like they would sit with a kid at lunch and this, but over time, it became such a popular program that she had more peer mentors willing to sign up and fewer kids. And then it blossomed, and some of those same kids that had always been sort of awkward and isolated started being invited to like the Friday night basketball game or to maybe meeting up at the mall or whatever. So she did it over time, but she's built this incredible culture at this high school. So it can happen. It can
Curious to
happen.
know how she convinced the popular kids to cooperate because it's challenging.
Of course it is. Well, I think a lot, there are kids that are insecure. The insecure kids, even if they're in the cool group, probably not going to do this. But the kids that
Yeah,
have pretty good
the
have
leaders.
good social skills and are not, and have a good security, they're the ones that might come forward and say, yeah, I'll do that because I want to be helpful. And then they found out, surprise, surprise, that they actually benefited as much, if not more, than the kid they were helping, you know? And I think that's why she called the program Peer Spective. And I mean, she has really done a phenomenal job. And I love that idea because then you're creating a whole different dynamic within the school, you know? And so does it take time to build that culture? Yeah, it does. It does. But it can happen. It can happen. It takes sort of you have to decide as a school community, this is a priority. And the other thing that came, I mean, because of technology again and kids getting bullied and the whole nine yards, this is why I think more than ever why we need this social emotional awareness because sometimes adolescents and preteens, they're not aware that the things they can say or do to their peers can be so hurtful and harmful that it can really scar a kid and to the point where we have kids that commit suicide because they feel so lonely or
Um,
isolated or just demoralized by this behavior. It's just terrible. So I feel like creating, I want to call it a culture of kindness is something that you need to make it as a goal. It's not going to happen overnight. It takes time, but I've seen cases where it really does work.
Yeah, because I think that kids, in the end of the day, want to feel meaningful. They want to feel they help and they feel they can assist other kids. And if you know how to do it right, it's great. What advice would you give teachers that their students are struggling with social skills? Um, how can you
Well,
focus on teamwork?
Well, with younger kids, you can do something called a social story. And these are very popular with early childhood up through like grade 3. And what they might do is they would do something where they could make that student the center of a story. They could write a script, they can take pictures, or they can find there's a lot of books out now written for kids that struggle with these issues, and the teacher could use it as a reading to the class. So that's one thing. With older kids, you may have to be, you're not necessarily doing reading story time when you hit middle and high school, but there's other things you can do. I actually am going to show you a book that I found. This is not my book, but the book is called The Social Skills Picture Book for High School and Beyond. And the reason I love this book is they give you some examples of how to, like this one might says, decide if you need to interrupt because you need help or want something. And they give examples of real life kids and conversations they might be having. So I love this book. I'll send you the title and the author, but I think that's a great book because kids can look through it too, and say, oh, okay, oh, that makes sense. Um, so I think I try to do things when I do my training, be it for parents or be it for teachers, to help them understand that these things we want to put in place don't happen overnight. They have to be embedded as part of the full day curriculum. They can't be done on isolation. Like in the old days, they would say, okay, Friday afternoon is when we're going to talk about this stuff. No, it has to be viewed as important enough that it's going to be part of the daily event, you know, and looking at your curriculum. And actually, you'll be surprised if you go online and say, as a teacher, how could I embed some social skills into this lesson? You'd be surprised they will come back with some strategies for you.
So you talked earlier and you said that it's possible to implement SEL in each class. So I'm as a sport therapist implement SEL when we play sport. So it's easier to focus on teamwork, especially with teenagers while we do sport because usually they enjoy it. Most of the teenagers love sport. And it's easier to analyze it and talk about it in the middle of the session because we are not a competitive sport team. We just play sport for fun and in order to guide the message that we want to deliver. And usually it's easier to do it while we play sport because as I said earlier, it's easier to teach when we have fun and we have good connection.
I had two of my former students, grad students, who happened to be coaches at the high school level for basketball. And
Yeah.
I had them create a mini lesson on how to address, like if they were going to train coaches, what do you need to know as a coach about SEL? Because there's some coaches, like you said, they want the kids to have fun and learn. I I was my youngest son's baseball team manager, and I was the only woman. And
Hmm.
I understood development of children, but I was sitting with some of the men who I think they thought these kids were going out for the Boston Red Sox. And I'd be like, are you kidding me? And they were judging them like, and I'm like, this is wrong. And I'm saying things to them like, well, developmentally. And they're all looking at me like, get her out of here. We don't need her. But the point is that these two guys did such a good job showing how an effective coach can really implement social skills and make sports fun and learning, And then there's the coaches that we see professionally, and then there's the parents that get it may not happen over there, but we have cases here where the parents get so abusive to the volunteer coaches that they get thrown out. And it's like, what? So I feel like I need to get to those parents and say, what are you doing to these poor people who are volunteering their time to help your kid have fun and you're like being out of control. So yeah, we have needs.
And how do you expect your kid to behave to the coach if your kid sees you that you behave this way? So you cannot expect from your kid to do
Absolutely.
something that you don't do. If you don't read, don't expect your kid to read. If you don't do sport, don't expect your son or your daughter to play sport. And if you curse when you drive, so don't expect to your kid to not curse as
Absolutely.
well.
It's like they will, kids will call you out because they say you're just being a hypocrite. And we are sometimes, So it's the idea is if you're abusive, if you're a parent going to a game and you're swearing at the ref and being totally disrespectful, and then your kid gets disrespectful and you're going to be surprised, So it's really, it's got to be one of those things we have to own our own behavior and help kids learn to say to their coaches or their teachers, thank you. They may not always like the correction they're getting. That's part of growing up, you know? Like, I always like to say to people, I go, oh, did you get nothing but good reports your entire life in every area? Nobody did. And part of the being, part of that thing about social emotional is learning relationship skills, responsible decision making. So you have to learn to accept correction and not blow up. You have to learn to say, internally, I don't like that I'm being corrected, but I will accept it and improve.
And it makes me a better person, a better sports player. It doesn't matter, but it makes me better. So if you see
Right.
it this way, so it's easier to handle it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
I
to
think,
me, it's a very rich field. It's something that we all need in our culture. We are living in a very turbulent time. We both know that. And I think, um, learning to show gratitude. For example, I when I was in college many years ago, I was doing my student teaching in another state and I wanted to stay all summer. And I became a custodian over the summer. That was my job.
yes.
And, my parents were like, "What are you what? What are you doing? Hop!" And I'm like, "It's fine." When I started teaching as a young teacher, I remember telling the custodians at my school that I had done this. And I said, "I have so much respect for your job. It's so important." Let me tell you, that comment went such a long way on building rapport. And I always said to my teachers that I trained, if you're rude or arrogant to the school custodian and some kid gets sick in your classroom, they're going to take the long way around to clean it up. Anything I needed or wanted and I had to ask a custodian, it was done in seconds. Why? Because I told them I understood their job and I respected it. And that goes a long way. That sense of I'm not better than anybody else and I respect you. We're all in this together. I like to train. If it was up to me, I would train not only the teachers, but the administration, the bus drivers, the cafeteria workers, because seriously, when you do this sort of global approach and everyone feels like we're all using the same language, we're all helping people be the best they can be, it can change the whole climate of a school. Likewise, it can be negative if you've got someone that's, just punitive all the time. That creates a whole, people will do things because they're afraid, but you're going to
Yeah.
build allegiance because of other ways.
Did you have an experience to work with the parents? Because I think that everything comes first from home, and as we talked earlier. Um, so do you do it?
Yes, I was just doing one last night, a social emotional in the home, and a lot of them
Yeah.
are very concerned about social media. And one thing I make jokes, but I'm dead serious. I said, Don't ever think you're going to outsmart your kid when it comes to social media. They're way ahead of us. But you must find out what they're into. You must have some controls on it. You can ask them about it. If they're playing a video game, sit next to them, have them explain it to you so you have some idea what's going on, because they can get deep down and sucked into some very negative places. And if parents just say, "Well, I don't know what they're doing," and they just throw their hands up, not a good idea. Not a good idea.
And
They
I think
have
it's
to
a
have an
win-win
awareness.
situation. I think it's a win-win situation because when you do with your kids and he explains to you what he's doing, so you earn two things. One, you have some good time with your kid or with your son or with your daughter. And secondly, usually we tell the kids all the time what to do, and if we have the opportunity that they teach us something, it makes them feel better, because all of a sudden they know something better than we do, and they feel secure and confident that hey, I can teach my dad or my mom something that they don't know, and so. And another thing that I feel that it makes them feel better that they know that the parents are curious about what they do and they want to learn about it. So you learn that, and at the same time, you can know exactly what they do and follow, since it's not something risky.
Yeah, and you can, and there's ways, like I even heard this, and this was not for me, it was somebody else I was listening to the other day, and they said when you're talking to adolescents especially, a lot of times we as parents want to give advice right away. That's just what we want to do because we want to fix it, right? And they said, this is what you need to do. You need to say, you look like something's bothering you. Would you like me to just listen, or do you want my advice? And
Yeah,
most of the time they say, just listen. Now, eventually they may want your advice. It's going to, you may have to use all your self control not to say, well, you know what you should do? Just listen. But listening before you say, but just listening is a hard skill. But oh my goodness, can that pay off? Do you want me to listen, or do you want my advice? And, that's a social skills strategy that really will build a better relationship. I raised 3 kids. When my kids were adolescents, none of them were angels. They drove me insane. I love them. I didn't always like them. People are shocked when I say that, but it's the truth. Now they're all very, very close to me. My daughter, who was definitely challenging, she's my best friend, and she herself is getting her master's in teaching. So there you go. You know, I had to do a lot of listening. Sometimes I'd be like, I couldn't believe it, what was going on, but I kept the door open. That's really important. Keeping that door open philosophically, emotionally is really important, because part of the job of being an adolescent is to break away from the parents, but it's painful. It's a very painful time. But if you get really angry and mad about all the craziness that they can do, you might shut a door forever, and that will never be open again. So learning to do that. Do you want me to listen, or do you want my advice? That's like powerful.
it's the key, and it's really important, I think, because they want to see that we listen. When you say but, as you said earlier, it means that we judge them and we want to tell them what they should have done and what was the mistake and how to fix it. They need someone that to listen. They want to know that we are with them and we support them. And sometimes just to listen, this is the best advice, just to listen.
I agree. I totally agree. So I
So
hope we covered most of the questions. Is there anything else you would like to? Oh, you asked me about how do I keep my calm? How do things you do to keep yourself calm when things get chaotic?
yeah, so what is one thing that you do to keep yourself calm when
All
it's
right. Well,
challenging?
I can give you a couple of things I tell teachers and parents, and then I'll talk personally. So when a young child maybe, is having a meltdown and they're very upset, crying, tantruming, what you want to avoid is what I say, throwing a match on the flame. The more loud they get, the quieter you get, the more still you get. It takes some practice, because you might be like, knock it off, and calm, like deep, helping them learn to breathe helping them say, I know you're really upset. You don't, they might even say some hurtful things like, I hate you, especially when they hit adolescent. Say, I know you're really upset, but I still love you even when you're upset. That's like, wow. I know you're really upset, but even though you're really upset, I still love you. So that's important. And, don't match if they're all worked up. You must calm. You must be like the yin and the yang. For myself personally now, I love Pilates. I do Pilates a lot. I walk. I have a lot of great friends. Um, I enjoy doing things like this. I like to travel when I can. So those are the things I do. Um, Watch a good movie from time to time or a bad one sometimes, just for mindless entertainment. I listen to a lot of books on CDs when I'm driving because sometimes I'll have to drive to go to the different places, and I find it
Yes.
keeps me calm and I don't get so stressed out about traffic. So those are some of the strategies I use to help me.
You said something great earlier that you said that upset because some kids they feel upset but they don't know how to call it, they don't know how to express their feeling. And when we use the word upset, or you are sad or angry or frustrated, so when we use it, so it's easier for them to express their feelings, the next time you can use it, and then it's easier to handle it, because sometimes kids face some challenge and they don't know how to name it, they don't know how to call it, and then it's most frustrating because they don't know how to
Yes.
express what they feel.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think adults struggle with that too. Sometimes you feel, I call it out of sorts, and you're not sure why. And someone might help you by giving you some, it sounds like, imagine parents say, it sounds like when you're really frustrated today, you know, and that may really, it's again, I'm listening with an open heart and mind. And I think that helps a lot. It doesn't, you know, raising kids is definitely, I don't care how many degrees you have, I don't care how much money you have, it is the hardest job. And when you're doing it, you're not even sure you're doing it right. And sometimes you won't know until many years in the future,
Mhm.
when your kids come back and say, I really hated when you did this, but I'm kind of glad you did. So it's tricky. But I do think I also, when I talk to parents, I say to them, find your allies. This is not something you should try to master alone. Find people that look at childcare or child rearing with a similar eye and have them be your allies. So when you're having a day and your kid is getting on your last nerve or whatever, you can call someone and say, oh, you're not going to believe what happened today. And that other person who's raised children too can say, oh, yes, that sounds really frustrating and hard, and that, I think that helped me get through those challenging years. I really do believe that. So I think it's important that, let's go back to social skills. If a person has trouble making that connection, they don't always know where to go to get those allies, and that can be hard too. So this is why these social skills, these are lifelong. I may never use algebra again, and I won't be sad about it. I'll be telling you, I'm not sad at all. But I need social skills till the day they plant me.
I was a professional basketball player, and coaches always say that if you are in a negative mindset, do something that you do well, and it will assist you to change to be in a positive mindset. How do you move yourself from a negative mindset to a positive mindset?
Well, I think some of the things I mentioned before, like if I'm having a rough day, I might do a little meditation. Um, I might call one of my best friends and we'll have a laugh. I'm a big one to say, find something to laugh about every day. I think laughter, that's old saying, laughter is the best medicine. I truly believe laughter has helped me get through a lot of challenges. And I've had quite a few. I lost my husband a long time ago. My sister just passed away, my only sibling, in January. These were really hard things, but I had such great support from friends it's really helped me deal with it and move on. And I also like doing things, like I said, I enjoy working with people, and sort of finding out what makes them tick and where they're coming from. I enjoy that type of stuff too.
And last questions, what three things are you grateful for? Are you grateful for today?
Well, I'm grateful for this opportunity, which I think is really kind of cool and fun. I'm grateful for the fact that it's a sunny day here and it's supposed to rain like cats and dogs tomorrow, so I'll enjoy today. Um, I'm grateful because my oldest son has his birthday today, and I called him on the phone and wished him a happy birthday. So I try to find something to be grateful for every single day. It does help.
Inspiring. It's inspiring. So thank you so much for your time. I learned a lot from you. It was fascinating. I'll share the link to your book and to the video clip that we discussed
Yes,
earlier.
that's a great. It's George Lucas, the one that did all the Star Wars stuff. So he's one of the big founders of Edutopia, and it's a fabulous resource to look up. They have articles, videos. It's very reader friendly. So that little clip is from Edutopia, and then I'll send you this title also. It's a great cool, but this is the idea of a social story. So those are things I think that might be helpful to people. And I wish you all the best. I hope, if you want to do future ones, I may be able to get some other people for you. Like I'm thinking of that friend in particular in
Yeah, I
Ohio.
would love to. I would love to.
Yeah, I think you'd really enjoy her. She also is co-authored. She's actually written 2 books on that topic, and she's a lot of fun to talk to. I think she'd be a good candidate, to talk to.
Perfect. Perfect.
All right.
So thank you so much for your time. Anything else you want to say before we finish?
No, I wish you all the best. And like I said, in this day and age, we all need more social emotional skills. So that's my hope.
Thank you so much for your time.